The following program deals with military and veteran issues. All comments and opinions expressed on this show are those who made them. They do not reflect the opinions of the Church of Satan or Radio Free Satan. So on with the show. Go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the official Infernal Legion Podcast. This is the December edition, also known as the Winter Solstice edition. I am your host and the commander of the Infernal Legion, Warlock Jeff Bowling, and with me as always is my wonderful co-host, Satanist Duwayne Burns, and our lovely producer, Warlock Jeff Ivins. Gentlemen, how are you?
Go, Duwayne.
I always wait on you to go.
Oh, I was trying to be nice.
You know, it's kind of like an age before beauty thing, you know?
Oh yeah, right.
Catch up. I've kind of been feeling like shit lately. I just got back from Devil's Reign, and I think either Ivins or Kohlmeyer gave me the clap while I was there.
Do you suck dicks?
Maybe if you didn't suck dicks, you wouldn't have the clap.
Well, it's not from me because he ain't touched me. So it must be Kohlmeyer.
Yeah, I didn't touch him. Yeah,
you hear that, XO? They're calling you out. Yes, a lot of you guys made it down there. I know Kohlmeyer was there. You two were there. How did it go? How was the event?
It was great.
It was fun.
I mean, it was a little different than normal years. We didn't have a book presentation or anything, and it was a little shitty that one of the performers canceled at the last minute. We still had a really, really good burlesque show, and the 50th, the dedication and the movie by Magister Abramson and stuff. That was all really cool.
Yeah. And I heard that High Priestess Nadramia gave a wonderful presentation on the history of the Satanic Bible.
Oh God! It was like 10,000, 12,000 words. I mean, she warned us before we sat down. She goes, "Don't be." She says, "Don't think it's disrespectful if you get up and have to piss or go get a drink or whatever. Feel free because you're gonna be sitting here a while."
Yeah, she did.
I think the work that Central is doing on compiling and archiving all of that history of the church is really important stuff, and I'm glad that there are places they can do that.
What was also really neat was around the whole room, Peter and Peggy went and they made reprints of the originals of pictures that the Doctor had, prior to starting the Church of Satan, when he had his witch group and different seminars he did, and then afterwards. Oh yeah. But there was pictures all the way around the room, and at the end of the final night, we were able to bid on them and take them home.
Oh, very cool.
And most of them only cost people like $10 a piece, but there must have been 200-300 pictures out there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Just different shit. I mean, there was a representation of the original Bessie Baphomet that the Doctor drew, and you wouldn't know it that it was a duplicate, but it was awesome. I mean, that people were just clawing to try to fucking get that one.
Mm-hmm.
I got kind of a neat book. Magister Frost is putting out new Satanic Bible notebooks and folders. Journal. Thank you. Notebooks and journal. It's kind of like a Trapper Keeper, the one, but
it's already for sale.
Yeah, well, I was just rubbing it in again that I got a
prototype,
the number one of 8 prototype of the Satanic Bible notebook. That was pretty cool.
Which was signed.
Which is signed and authenticated. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Did you guys get any good shenanigans outside of the show?
Yeah. They saw Satan Claus and freaked him out. I actually slept through that one. Yeah. But there was some adult bookstore running, adult shop running, and hit some thrift stores and some bookstores. Everybody pretty much, they did their own thing, but they, kind of stuck together too. I mean, there were times that Jeff was tired or his husband was tired. Yeah. They weren't going anywhere. I swear. You remember when I pulled up in front of the restaurant, Jeff, and was like, "Hey, I'm headed over to Square One. You ready to go?" And you're like, "Nah, man, we just ordered a pizza," and you were out there smoking. Yeah. Did you see that I pulled out of the parking lot of the hotel, and I drove up, and the sign told, the sign and my phone said, "In 200 feet, do a U-turn." So I did a fucking U-turn, and I passed you at the hotel. Yeah. Sitting out there smoking. In 250 feet, do a U-turn. And I did this like 4 fucking times.
Yes, I did notice.
Because I didn't know where I was or what the fuck was going on, and I finally looked, and there's Jeff still smoking outside of the hotel. I'm like, what the fuck? So I was stuck in a lull because literally I looked at the map quest, and it was like right across the field from me, the goddamn Square One restaurant. If I could have drove across the field, I could have went to it. But I had to actually go out, go around, get on a road, and fucking travel like 8 minutes instead of going across this field. Yeah. But my GPS had me going in circles, and I'm sitting out there going, "What the fuck?" I mentioned that in one of the event messages, and Peggy's like, "Yep, I'm putting this in the fucking archive."
Well, you got to bust out your compass, shoot an azimuth, get back to your land after him.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. If I had done that, I'd have drove the truck across the field.
What about you, Jay? Nothing? What are some of your fondest memories of?
Just the essay that was read by... The essay that was read. My other half, actually, believe it or not, is actually starting to study Satanism.
Oh, really?
Between the essay and the movie, we only caught the first one. We didn't. Into the Devil's Den. We didn't catch the second one. But it was. He's like, now I get what he's into. Now I get it, and I'm like, duh.
Been a while.
I had seen that you had posted something. So if Reverend Campbell, if you're listening, people are looking for your YouTube stuff, brother. I don't know what's going on. If you're going on a new platform or something, there's people that miss your stuff.
Well, if he is going on a new platform, I highly recommend BitChute. I'm loving BitChute lately. But so Devil's Reign, great event, right? Oh, yeah. But the month is not over yet. Just here in a couple of days, it's going to be the winter solstice, which is a wonderful time of year. The beginning of winter, the longest night, all of that. Do you guys have any interesting plans for that?
Not me.
Yeah, not me either.
Other than cuddling with my other half.
I'd imagine winter holds a little bit less sway down in Florida.
It really does. My 8-year-old the other day, she come up to me and said, "Dad, how's Santa going to land his sleigh? There's no snow here." And if you know Florida down here, our front yards are either sand or rock. Mm-hmm. There's no grass.
Well, speak for yourself.
Well, I don't have any fucking grass. Well, he can't even land on the grass because there's no grass. So then I think she's getting to the point where she's...
You need to tell her.
Understanding that there's no Santa. And she come up to me the other day, she said, "Dad," she said, can I have some money to buy some gifts?" Well, seeing as Santa can't land here and Santa won't be here,
we'll have to figure out the physics.
Are you and Mom Santa?
We'll have to figure out the physics of Santa going through a central air system to get into an apartment.
Yeah.
Well, I tried to do that with her, and she said, well, I watched Tim Allen, and all he did was squeeze down a pipe, and it made its own chimney. You don't have to have one.
Oh, no.
I was like, how do I fucking compete with that?
Yeah.
How does anyone compete with Tim Allen? I mean, really.
Arr, arr, arr.
Well, we do not have a guest on this episode. Unfortunately, schedules just didn't align with anyone. So instead, we're going to be covering a bunch of news that's been happening around the military and in the veteran world. But before we get to that, let's go to a quick break, and we'll be right back with some talk about the Army-Navy football game.
Hey, buddy, what's happening? Yeah, I'm hosting a show called Furious Sound, all punk and hardcore. What? People still listen to it? It's on RadioFreeSatan.com. Radio Free Satan. Just read the FAQ. This is Citizen Matt. Ease your frustrations by tuning into Furious Sound, hardcore punk on Radio Free Satan.
This is Reverend Gene, the host of Vox Satanae, exclusively on Radio Free Satan. Join me every week as we indulge in the classical side of music spanning the past 1,000 years. Vox Satanae has already featured over 700 composers covering medieval, baroque, classical, romantic, and contemporary music, including chant, choral, opera, keyboard, and orchestral music, with composers ranging from Gluck to Gilmore, Bach to Bellavance, Tallis to Taverner, and Paganini to Parrot. Get your weekly recommended dose of classical music right here on Vox Satanae, only on Radio Free Satan. With me, Reverend Gene. Hail Satan!
Go.
Welcome back to the official Infernal Legion podcast. All right, gentlemen, let's talk about America's game. On December 14th, the Army and Navy played their 120th game between service academies, between the United States Military Academy at West Point, the United States Naval Academy. And Navy whooped our ass. So congratulations and fuck you, Jeff.
Don't forget Rick. Rick's a fucking Navy squid too.
Yeah. The final score was 31-7.
No shit.
which is quite horrible. I know a lot of people, I'm sure you guys are the same. We don't really follow football religiously or anything, but most people that were in the military followed these service academy games and the Commander-in-Chief's Cup, at least somewhat. So congratulations to the United States Naval Academy on taking back the Commander-in-Chief's Cup from West Point. And so for people who don't understand how that cup works, I'm going to break it down real quick. There are 3 service academies that compete for the Commander-in-Chief's Cup. That's the Air Force Academy, the Naval Academy, and the United States Military Academy. So Army, Navy, Air Force. Earlier this year, on October 5th, Navy pulled out a squeaker against the Air Force, 34-25, to beat them. And then with the win over Army, they officially beat both of the other service academies and got their trophy back. But while I was doing some research on this, I found it very interesting, and we should all be ashamed, that the Air Force has actually won that trophy more times than either the Navy or the Army.
But not in modern history.
That is true, but they're still up 20.
I don't care. They haven't won anything here in the last 20 years?
That's true. They've been pretty shitty for the last couple of days.
All right, for you guys that are saying why only 3 services, well, the Marine Corps and the Coast Guard. Well, the Coast Guard are their own entity, but
They have their own service academy.
They're basically the Navy, but the Marine Corps falls under the United States Navy.
The United States Coast Guard Academy does not have a football team.
No,
right.
At least not one that competes in the NCAA. So,
you know what I dread seeing is fucking the football game where we got to go against Space Force. I had to get Space Force in there somehow.
Space Force.
Jesus H. Christ.
But yeah, so despite the crippling score, it was actually a pretty fun game. I enjoyed watching it. I had some beers. My significant other was sleeping, and I was screaming. I was screaming at the TV. During the whole thing.
I can actually see that.
Well, what I think makes the Army Navy game in particular so impressive to watch is that, unlike other sporting events, nowadays every sporting event does like the national anthem and they have a color guard and all that. But when the service academies get out there, they all march on the field in their uniforms, looking, everything's spit shine. The president is usually there. There's all kinds of stuff.
At the end of the game, they both do their alma mater.
Yeah. It's very tradition rich. It's very customs.
They're very respectable to each other. I mean, they're very respective. They know they're on the same team as far as the military. But when they get on the field, they're there to kick each other's ass at the end of the day. Exactly. At the end of the game, they're all happy friends again, respect each other's alma mater, and they do, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and they always pull out interesting things like throwbacks. So like the United States Naval Academy is wearing one of their very first uniforms for the football team as a callback to that. That was really cool. And then the Army was paying tribute to the 1st Cavalry Division with their patches and symbols all over them. It's just a really interesting game to see military culture played out on the football field.
Oh yeah.
So I've always enjoyed that, and I definitely want to give a special nod to the quarterback for the United States Naval Academy, Malcolm Perry, who I don't think he passed that ball once, maybe once in the entire game.
He played that game all on his own.
Well, the Army can't stop a run, so what do you expect?
He ran that ball. I don't even know what his final total was, but I do know that he broke the record for most yards rushed in the Army-Navy football game. And that record had been in place
look it up, but I think it was like 317 yards.
Yeah, and he busted it out with a last-minute 15-yard touchdown run, which was impressive.
On a fumble,
yeah.
It wasn't enough that he was kicking the shit out of us. He wanted that record.
And I do believe he's a Marine, so Jeff doesn't get all the credit for that.
Hey, he's Department of the Navy. He's Department of the Navy. Deal with it.
All right, are you guys looking up the yardage? Yeah, okay. But, I would be remiss not to bring up again, we talked about it in, I believe, episode 2, and they mentioned it during the game as well.
Well, he signed it during the game.
During this game?
He actually signed the executive order during the game. That's why I thought it important to tie it into it.
Okay, well, regardless, we talked about the executive order that allows the service academy athletes to pursue professional football careers instead of, not instead of, but to delay their active service and their service obligation in order to play professional football. Now, we talked about this before. I'm not a fan of this rule.
I'm not either.
I enjoy watching these kids play football, the young butter bars that are going to be stepping into the military, but we're paying for their degree so that they will go and serve their country. And there's no guarantee after playing professional football that you're going to be in any kind of shape to serve your country when those contracts are up. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys. What do you think about that?
I think it's bullshit.
As I do. I mean, I don't know what kind of paratrooper or infantry officer you're going to be
when your
knees out. You bust your back or something.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you do? I mean, the only way that I would agree to that is if they put a clause in there, all these millions of dollars that you're going to be making as a pro, if something happens to you, you will pay back for what we did for your training.
Yeah.
Right.
All these millions of dollars you're going to make as a pro athlete, you can pay back what the taxpayers paid in for you to get this training.
Well, and that's another issue, another thing too. I mean, they're going to make a boatload of money in professional.
Absolutely.
And how does it affect? There's already a bridge between enlisted and officers in the military,
right?
But how much deeper does that bridge get if your, platoon leader, let's say, is worth $345 million?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I just tried to look up, and I couldn't find his yardage.
Oh, well.
And the major in the unit, he just makes what he makes in his officer's salary. Well, sir, don't send me on this deployment, and I'll give you $400,000.
Yeah,
right.
Now you got that shit happening where butter bars are bribing their officers not to send them out.
And that's not to say that obviously, you're in the money, yeah. But it's the military is a different environment, and there has to be a kind of, I don't know, mutual respect going on. Right. That money certainly hinders when you're in uniform. Now, there have been pro football players who have gone on to enlist in the military
after their military service.
Exactly.
Well, I was thinking specifically of Pat Tillman, who left the Arizona Cardinals to enlist in the Army. He was worth millions,
But patriotism was more important to him than money.
Right, and so, and he lived it that way.
Yeah,
which
sadly it cost him his life, but yeah,
in a friendly fire accident.
Yep.
Fucking Rangers.
Yeah, you can't shoot for shit. Put them on the football field. They still can't do anything right.
Now, mind you, when this was brought up, when the executive order was brought up, and the concept of these guys going up, it wasn't presented as a huge controversy during the game, which I'm happy for, because the game is what it is. But there was, as always, an outrage culture.
I think we may have lost Duwayne.
You want to pause?
I'm here. Oh, okay. He just turned his camera off.
All right. There was a bit of controversy, as to be expected in outrage culture, that followed the game because, and I'm sure you guys have heard of this, the cadets from West Point and the midshipmen from the Naval Academy were flashing the OK sign to each other, which...
Hey, Lou, can I get this real quick before you go into that?
Yeah, go for it.
We were looking for this information. 5'9", 120-pound Malcolm Perry, who carried the ball 29 times, scored a pair of touchdowns on runs of 55 and 15 yards, using a devastating jump cut to break free. Using a devastating jump cut to break free on the first, and pure speed on the second. He finished the game with Navy's single-season records for rushing yards. Now, this is a season. Rushing yards, 1,804 yards, and total offensive yards of 2,831 yards. Malcolm Perry's record-setting 304-yard rushing day sparked the 31-7 win over Army.
All right.
So those were the statistics you were looking for.
304 yards. So put that in perspective. That is 3 football fields and then 4 yards.
Yep.
On top of it.
Over 900 feet.
Wow. All right. But yeah, so the cadets and the midshipmen were apparently flashing the OK sign at each other. Now, this is a thing that started on 4chan. A horrible messaging board that nobody should ever be a part of.
But unfortunately, they are.
Right. But a joke was created on there, which infected the mainstream culture, that said that the OK sign was a symbol of white nationalism and white supremacy, which it obviously is fucking not. But it's a joke, and everyone, including the media, has been running with this thing. So, of course, the younger generation, of who all of these cadets and midshipmen are a part of, considering they're in college right out of high school, are playing along and having fun and having a joke at everyone else's expense. But, of course, this blew up into a huge controversy, and it got to the point where the Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, had to comment on it. And to be quite honest, I'm a little disappointed that he took it so seriously. I really am.
A little bit of cover your ass.
Yeah, basically.
Go ahead.
If he had to get involved, that was because the SecNav couldn't do it himself.
Right. Well, it wasn't just the Navy either. It was also the West Point cadets.
Yeah, West Point did it too.
But yeah, so it's not that I disagree with anything he said. I absolutely agree with him. For example, he said, there is no room whatsoever for anybody to have or to be a white nationalist or to be a member of any hate group whatsoever or harbor anything like that. I agree. In the military, there is no room for that. I'd prefer it didn't exist in society as a whole, but, you know, people can think whatever they want to. But in the military, there's no room for that. We're one team, one fight. We have to rely on each other. But a couple of young kids flashing an OK symbol to each other because it's an internet joke is not a sign that white nationalism has taken over the military.
No, there's not a sign of it, but the thing about it is there are people in the military today that joined to get the training so when they get out, they can train other white nationalists.
Oh, absolutely. There's Bloods and Crips.
I agree with that.
There's Bloods and Crips and MS-13 members that are in the military doing the same thing. I mean, when you have a military as large as ours, you're not going to, especially considering where they recruit, you're not always going to get people who are above board or patriotic or whatever the case may be.
Might that be the reason why when you're going through the MEP station in the recruiting area that they ask you if you belong to any of these organizations?
Yeah, absolutely.
But those assholes are going to lie about it anyway.
Well, of course.
And let's be honest, if the military was completely squeaky clean, we wouldn't need MPs or, you know, special investigations.
Hey. Just because people like me got in trouble, you know, while we were in.
But honestly, I really think that, and a lot of this spurred because the Anti-Defamation League added this OK gesture to its thing. Now, I really feel like the ADL and the SPLC are losing more and more credibility as days go by. And I could point to a number of things that have nothing to do with the military for why I say that. But again, this whole thing, this flashing the OK sign, is a joke. It always has been a joke from 4chan. And then as Duwayne, as you mentioned before we started recording, it used to be a game too, where you'd put it below your waist, you know, upside down. If someone saw it,
you'd get somebody to look and you'd rack them in the nuts with your knuckles.
Yeah.
For looking.
And then, of course, there's the scuba. It's the international sign for scuba divers to say that they're okay. There's a whole number of things. Same thing with helicopters. You know, they use that sign when you're doing air assaults and things like that. It's a fucking joke, and I think the society is taking it way too damn seriously and letting the trolls win.
Like with anything else.
Yeah. Well, letting the trolls win is basically...
People have to get their 2 minutes of fame or 15 seconds of fame. You know, they got to be out there.
Yeah. Fucking internet trolls.
I know.
But
people would bitch if they were hung with a new rope.
Yep.
Ah!
There you go. Perfect response. But yeah,
are you about to call me an asshole?
Regardless of all that controversy, all that bullshit, whatever, it was a fun game to watch. All credit to the future Marines and sailors on the Naval Academy for kicking ass this season and doing really well. Definitely for kicking our ass.
Damn right.
But we'll get you next year.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, congratulations to them, and congratulations to them for taking on the Commander-in-Chief's Cup. Can't wait to see what the next season holds with the new crop of sailors, Marines, soldiers, and airmen.
One more little dig into the Army. At least the Navy's going to an actual bowl game this year.
That is true. That is unfortunately true.
That reminds me, my son's catching shit at school about Ohio State.
Good.
What about Ohio State?
Yeah, what about
rising from number 8 up to number 1, and
good for them.
A bowl game. What do you mean good for them? Buckeyes football good.
I will remind you, while I live in Ohio, I was not born or raised here, so I have no love for OSU.
Oh, fuck you then. I wasn't born there either, but you know.
Oh,
my pro team is Green Bay, so you know.
Oh, let's see. Yeah. He was a
and yet another reason to hate you.
He's a wagon jumper.
Hey, at least that team, the citizens own the team, nobody else.
So let's shift gears here for a moment, and let's jump to the future of these cadets and midshipmen, future Marines and sailors and soldiers. Let's jump to their future for a minute, and let's talk about the war in Afghanistan, or as it started to be called recently, the never-ending war.
Yeah.
We are going on 18 years. Actually, we're over the 18-year mark. We're over the 18-year mark of military operations in Afghanistan. There's been some drawdowns, and then there's been some troop surges, and more drawdowns, and more troop surges. Recently, we saw President Trump trying to negotiate with the Taliban and some things like that. Supposedly, there's an announcement coming soon that 4,000 troops are going to be withdrawn from Afghanistan again. But at the end of the day, this war has been going on for a very long time. And we have reached the point, which I think is a significant thing to mention, where people who are now enlisting in the military weren't even alive to see 9/11.
Yep. Right.
And that's never happened before in American history.
Have you seen the reports, Jeff, that I don't know if I want to call them whistleblower reports, but there's been reports out there that we've been getting inaccurate information as far as our success over in Afghanistan.
See the collective shock.
And on mine.
It is said that it's unwinnable for us, and nobody wants to admit that within our ranks. Because Afghanistan already kicked the shit out of Russia.
Yeah, well, to me, it's another Vietnam. It's a no-win scenario.
Right.
Yeah, because and you got to think about the long game too. Like, what does a win mean in Afghanistan? We haven't even defined that.
Exactly.
We don't know what.
Well, there's no mission over there right now, really.
Other than keep the Taliban at bay.
Yeah, when we first
we're
went in
not
there,
even doing that because they're really not doing anything. They're just waiting for us to pack up and leave so they can take over.
That's what the Viet Cong did.
Yeah, but again, with no definition of victory, there's no way to have victory, right? And so when we first went in there, it was to root out Al Qaeda and catch Osama bin Laden and take the Taliban out of power.
And we did that.
Yeah. So did that mean we won?
Out.
But if that means victory, why are we still there?
Yeah.
So
we want to put an army base there now.
Right.
They want
station them over there full time.
Yeah.
They want to put a new Camp Air, John, but do it over there. Right?
Yeah. And by no means I do want to put this disclaimer in there. I spent some time in Afghanistan. I by no means am taking away from the men and women who have served in Afghanistan.
No.
This is more of a philosophical, political kind of thing than it is an indictment of what the troops are doing. But yeah, so on that note, I was in the doctor's office the other day, and there was an issue of Time magazine from October, sitting around, and there was an article in there that I found brought up some really interesting perspective on the war.
Read?
Yeah.
And how possibly it.
Army teaches you how to read.
It was written by Elliot Ackerman, a former Marine turned journalist who writes for Time now. And basically what he presented in there, he begins the article by talking about Memorial Day and how he takes his children to Arlington National Cemetery on Memorial Day. And his daughter, I'm sorry. He says, on the drive home, my daughter asked if someday she would have to fight in a war. Only if you want to, kiddo, I answered. But I could feel my response stick in my throat. And so he goes on to talk about the nature of a volunteer fighting force and what that means and how it affects the public's view of a war that's going on. And like I said, this is a very interesting perspective. I'm not saying I fully endorse it, but is an interesting perspective because the case that he makes is that if the military is an all-volunteer force, then everyone who signed up to do it isn't seen as in as much of a plight to the American public. So the American public tends to forget about what's going on. Whereas if they instituted the draft and sons and daughters were essentially being forced to serve in the military and go fight in this war, the American public would be more invested and it could end the war.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think? I mean, like I said, just an interesting perspective. Feel free to tear it apart or support it or whatever. Tell me what you guys
I'm going to tear it apart.
Uh-oh.
All right. You start drafting people again and forcing people again. You start getting, and they don't have to be hippies per se, 1960s hippies, but you get your Antifa or whatever, you get your hippies out there that are going to, hell no, we won't go, fuck your war, burning their cards and this and that. You get a whole nother group of anarchists out there that are, and you give them a reason to bitch.
Right, and that's his point.
A lot of people, I mentioned this, in a message group the other day or yesterday, we were talking. They created the Selective Service to abolish the draft, and that brought on the IRR, the Inactive Ready Reserve, so they could call you back to service if need be, so that we didn't have to have a draft. But, and they got that idea because a lot of soldiers in Vietnam that were being drafted got smart and said, you know what? If I fucking sign up and volunteer before they take me, I'll get to choose my own job. And if I want to be in the Navy, I'll be in the Navy. I won't be drafted into the Army or the Marine Corps and be a grunt. I'll get the job I want and do what I want in the military. And as people were doing that, the government figured out what they were doing, and they enacted the Selective Service and the IRR, and they abolished the draft.
Right. Quick note on that. The idea of protesters and burning draft cards and whatnot is his point. If we enacted the draft, that stuff would happen, and it would have to be in everyone's face.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't be able to forget about the war. But I understand what you're saying. It would cause a lot of problems, and it would. I agree.
And the little shit that people bitch about nowadays, that would be just something they would really bitch about.
Right.
But that would force the government to actually withdraw from Afghanistan. I think that's what
in theory.
In theory, that's the goal of what the guy is writing about, I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we don't want to force people into service and then start shitting on our service members like they did. The Vietnam guys come home and get bags, paper bags of dog shit thrown at them. And, you're a baby killer. You're this. You're that. We don't want to force people.
Right, and I agree. There's a lot of negatives that come with the draft, and we saw a lot of that during Vietnam, especially with the way service members get treated. And we've talked about it before on the show how Vietnam members are still fighting to get any type of benefits in some cases because of what they went through. But Jay, nothing. You had some thoughts.
Oh, it's just
Duwayne would shut the fuck up.
Yeah. No, to me, it's basically if everybody had skin in the game, maybe this wouldn't go on forever. You know, because this is the longest war we've had, and my main concern is it started back in the Bush years, continued with the Obama years, and it's just continuing with the Trump years. And there's no accountability in my book about, you know, what we're doing over there anymore or anything like that, you know. And I'm just,
if we're lucky, the media might report on a couple deaths here and there, but they don't really talk about the war.
Yeah, and my whole thing is basically, I'm worried about the troops that are over there without a mission. I mean, when we went to Desert Storm, we had a mission. Mm-hmm. We had a planned out mission. This is what we were here to do, and this is what we did. There's not one now.
Yeah, and I've long been a critic of nation building. I'm not a fan of that. If we're going to go to war, it has to be for a purpose. We have to accomplish the mission and get the fuck out.
Yep.
And that's, in my opinion, the war in Iraq went on too long, but at least it was a better example of that than what's happening in Afghanistan right now, which is just out of control.
And we made more of a mess of Iraq by capturing him and letting them execute him, because now it's a fucking mess over.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
You know goddamn well if Saddam Hussein was in charge over there when ISIS came, ISIS would have never even came about. And if they did, Saddam, being the crazy fuck he is, he would have said "fuck you" and he'd have launched chemical weapons on them and killed them all and been done with it.
Well, not only that, but Iran wouldn't be as powerful in the region either, because Saddam didn't get along with Iranians all that well either.
So, I believe he was the direct result of the Iraq-Iran war.
No, he was in charge of the Iraq-Iran war.
Yeah, he was.
He was the one he invaded.
Because George Bush Sr. helped to put him in power back in...
back when...
In the CIA.
Yeah, back when it was him and Ronald Reagan.
We could talk all day long about... how Osama bin Laden was Mujahideen, about how ISIS was armed and funded by the United States.
Yeah.
That's a whole rabbit hole. And none of it's false. I'm not saying it's conspiracy theory. It's all true.
Yeah.
Well, your main problem with Iran and Iraq hating each other at the time was your Sunni and Shiite Muslims.
Yeah.
Which was the main problem in Iraq as well when we invaded it.
Yeah, and the thing about it, now you got the Kurds being invaded on. Yeah, everybody's going to attack the Kurds, who were our biggest help against ISIS. What the hell?
Yeah,
that's Turkey doing that shit now. It's because
there is a balancing game that has to take place, because Turkey is a member of NATO, and so they are allies. But of course, the Kurds have been allies as well. So there's a whole facet of things going on. It's like a big game of Risk, basically.
It is.
But yeah, I don't know necessarily that I agree with bringing back the draft, but like I said, it was a very interesting perspective, and one I had not considered before, about what that could mean for the war if something like that were to happen. Would it end the war early? Would it how much fallout on the back end would be as a result of that? What kind of precedent
it would? I don't believe it would help at all. We'd go through 6 to 9 months of people arguing it. I'm going to go to court for this, for my rights. Why today is it illegal to draft me and now it's legal to? I mean, there'd be all sorts of congressional hearings and this and that. It would be a clusterfuck.
People with bone spurs getting out of service.
Exactly. Right, Rick?
I'm not talking about Rick. I'm talking about Trump.
No, that's what I'm talking about. I'm trying to dig into Rick about it.
He's taking a jab at Rick, and like I have said before, we are politically neutral on the show.
Yo, absolutely.
Hey, I'm just calling it as I see it. It's not. I'm not.
We are politically neutral.
I am neutral.
We're just bringing to light that our illustrious president, all the money his father had and everything, and it's an injury. It's an injury he doesn't even remember he had.
But yeah, so again, interesting perspective. And you know what I find, and this goes back to the satanic way of thinking, is it's not so much that I have to agree with anything interesting like that I read, but the fact that someone is bringing about, almost to an extent, not necessarily, but to an extent, a third side perspective on the war is something that helps, I think, further society along and helps us arrive. The solution may not be to instate the draft, but someone is out there saying, hey, what about this?
Yeah.
And in my opinion, that's a very satanic way of looking at things. So props to Elliot on a very interesting article that definitely had me paying attention from beginning to end. And, thank you for your service, sir. But yeah, it was an interesting article. Anyone wants to check it out, it's in Time Magazine. It was published on October 10th, 2019, so it's in the October issue of Time Magazine. And it is called Why Bringing Back the Draft Could Stop America's Forever Wars. So if anyone's interested in reading it, go check it out. Like I said, we're not endorsing it or saying that it's absolutely a bad idea. We're just kind of tearing it apart and looking at it on an interesting perspective. So we're going to end the show on a very dark note. So before we do that, let's take one more quick commercial break, and we'll be back to talk about the recent shootings on military bases.
Seriousness is next to godliness. Faith is a virtue for the solemn and serious mind. Be God-fearing, and laugh not, for laughter is a tool of the devil. Remain pious and sanctimonious at all times. Laughter is an evil which, the hell with it.
Listen to The Devil's Mischief, a unique weekly podcast of most carnal comedy and netherworld novelty, hosted by your most irreverent Reverend Bill M., who serves up a new devilishly delightful mix of laughter each and every week on The Devil's Mischief. Tune in and indulge your funny bone today. Listen to The Devil's Mischief, available now at RadioFreeSatan.com.
Take a trip back to the 1980s with me, Warlock Jeff Ivins, on the Metro Radio Free Satan's show, highlighting the new wave and other hits from the indulgent decade, only on RadioFreeSatan.com.
The podcast you are listening to is brought to you through Radio Free Satan. To get the new episodes of this show downloaded automatically to your PC or mobile device, you can subscribe to this podcast and your other Radio Free Satan shows too, by using iTunes or Stitcher or other subscription means. To find out how, go to RadioFreeSatan.com and visit the individual page for this program, where you'll find the subscription links for iTunes, Stitcher, and more under Subscribe. You can also rate and review the program on iTunes and Stitcher. Thank you for your support of Radio Free Satan, and now back to the show.
Go.
All right, welcome back to the Infernal Legion Podcast. As I said, we're going to close out the show on a kind of a dark note. We're going to talk about two shootings that have occurred on military bases since the month started. The first one was in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, where a U.S. sailor shot two civilian Defense Department employees and wounded a third before he killed himself. He was supposedly a sailor who was assigned to a submarine that was dry docked for repairs at Pearl Harbor. There's no real... I haven't been able to find anything that actually talks about what his reasoning was, but it seems to me... he was assigned to the USS Columbia. But it seems to me that it was just, like a lot of these, quote-unquote mass shootings we've seen recently, this guy was just a disillusioned guy who was fed up with bullshit. And we all know that leadership in the military can really get under your skin. Not a defense, mind you. But it doesn't seem like there was a bigger thing. It doesn't seem like he was radicalized or, was acting on behalf of a foreign power or anything like that. But yeah, it was a really strange situation. I know when I woke up, and it happened right before. Was it right before or right after the Pearl Harbor Day of Remembrance? Right before. Yeah.
Well, this is why we put them through psych evaluations and shit before we put them under the ice for 6 months.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, he was probably cuckoo in the head from being under the ice or under the polar cap, under the ocean, whatever, for 6 months. They at times don't see sunlight for 6 months.
Right. Even when the sub comes up for air, that doesn't necessarily mean all the sailors are getting to see the light.
No.
What I am interested in, and I haven't seen any, I don't know if you guys have this information, but where did he get the gun?
Well,
like the arms room on a sub is locked down hard. The arms room on base is locked down hard. Hawaii is a pretty anti-gun place, and it's an island.
Yeah, but you can still get guns out there. There's gun shops out there.
If you're in the military, you're not a felon.
No, you're not.
They're going to give you one.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just like in Florida.
You still got to wait the 10 days. But.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's a lot of supposition. But there's nothing that says where he got it.
Was he dry docked there?
Yeah, he was dry docked.
Yeah, the sub was dry docked.
Or is that sub part of Pearl's fleet?
No, it was dry docked for repairs at Pearl Harbor. It's not assigned to Pearl Harbor.
Okay, well, I couldn't answer that for you then. Yeah. I mean, maybe he was assigned there, it was his gun, and he had it already. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe he was on watch when he did it. I don't know. There's we haven't got that information.
Yeah, we haven't got any reports on any of that yet.
And the Naval Criminal Investigation Service, the lead investigator, Chadwick, I don't know his first name, said that he didn't even know the type of weapon that was used at the time. It was reported on by the Military Times. So there's a lot of questions around that one, and it got overshadowed by what happened in Florida, which we'll talk about in a minute. But it doesn't appear to be any type of foreign power or the sailor going over to the extreme Muslim side or anything like that.
Right, no foreign influence.
Yep.
Yeah. I do think that it's interesting that his target, I don't know if they were his targets or if he was just shooting willy-nilly, because honestly there hasn't been a lot of coverage of this because it got overshadowed. But I do find it interesting that he hit DoD civilians instead of
chain of command.
Federal service members. Yeah, or chain of command or something like that. So there's a lot of weird questions there. But have either of you guys ever been to Pearl Harbor?
I have.
I have as well. I was stationed down at Schofield Barracks.
Right. What is that base like? I mean, it's the place of, besides 9/11, the most severe attack on American soil, like in history.
Well, Pearl Harbor and Hickam Air Force Base are actually a joint base now.
Right.
So the Air Force, because the Navy wants to use the runways and stuff for the jets and shit, they can run jets out to their carriers that are at sea and land them there instead of building another airstrip. It's just a combined joint base.
Right.
It's big.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
It's enormous.
Is there
I mean, Hickam itself is enormous, then you add Pearl to it.
I know every year on December 7th they do the big memorial thing for Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Is there signs of that around base like all the time? Is there like plaques and memorabilia and things like that?
Yeah.
Well, they've got a place in Waikiki. It's called Fort DeRussy, and all Fort DeRussy is a parking lot for military soldiers. If you want to go down to Waikiki and leave your car there so you can go and fuck around on the beach or whatever, and you don't have to search for parking and get tickets or whatever, this parking lot, which is now a multi-level parking area, if I remember right, and it's guarded by soldiers. You have to have an ID to get into it and everything. But you can see the Medal of Honor Museum is right in front of it across the street. Right just beyond that, you can see the memorial for the Arizona, and you can actually go over there from there. That's how close it is. And I mean, you go there people are going to see the Arizona every day.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's pretty in your face, and you know it's there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know I watched some of the memorial ceremony live on the 7th, and obviously it was a much more somber occasion considering there had been a shooting just 3 days before that.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, it's just a really shitty situation. So, and we've said it before, and I'll say it again. If we talk about veterans a lot and the suicide problem and things like that, but if you're on active duty and you're feeling in some kind of way, you need to reach out to somebody. And if you don't feel like you can reach out to your chain of command, you can always go to mental health or something like that. Like, don't let this shit get to you to the point where you do something fucking stupid like this, and take the lives of people you're supposed to be serving and protecting.
Yep.
Fucking ridiculous. But yeah, just a rough situation. But then it doesn't end there, because the day after Pearl Harbor, there was another shooting, and this was in Naval Air Station Pensacola, in Florida. Now, this one is a little bit more...
Which, of course, they jump to conclusions, and right away they're linked.
Right. Yeah, they definitely tried that, but that disappeared pretty quickly. This one was more straightforward in the sense that we knew who the bad guy was. We knew why he was doing it.
Thankfully, one of our guys.
Why it was doing it. But yeah, it was Mohammed Saeed al-Shamrani, 21 years old, who was a second lieutenant in the Royal Saudi Air Force. He killed 3 aviation students, all of which were United States service members, before he was killed by a local sheriff's deputy in the attack. Now, there's been a lot of talk about his actions leading up to this and what went down. It appears that he went back to Saudi Arabia after being assigned there to train for a while, and when he came back, his mood was completely different. That's what his fellow Saudi pilots are saying about him. He also held a meeting with some of his fellow Saudi pilots where he showed videos of mass shootings. Mm-hmm. Though the Navy at this time doesn't suspect that any of them are involved. They're all cooperating with the investigation and all that. And then, of course, a couple days after this happened, the Pentagon suspended foreign students from training in the United States until they can come up with a better screening process. Now, this is something that may surprise a lot of people listening who don't know how the military works, but there is a long history of allied nations sending their officers and their enlisted men to train with us on our bases, and vice versa. Like, for example, the Army has the Jungle Expert training program. It's about a 4-week program that happens down in South America, and that's actually run by the French. And the Marines, I think, do that as well. But we also have, like, I went to AIT at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and there was every member of NATO and then some officers walking around while we were in formation getting ready to go train on our thing, learning how to use their field artillery pieces and things like that. So this is not new. Like, I know a lot of people were shocked. Like, well, what was a Saudi national even doing training on a naval air base? This is not a new thing.
No.
It's been happening for a very long time.
Yeah.
Well, I know during the Army-Navy game, I saw a couple German officers or German cadets out there. They had their German flags on. I mean, even there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you sit there and think about it, pre-World War II, Admiral Yamato was trained here in the United States.
Admiral Yamato,
right.
Yep, he was trained here. Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is not a new thing, but it is on hold now, and it apparently applies to all foreign service personnel until they figure out some new... Now, the ones who are already in the States training are still here. They're just not allowed to train until they figure out what their new screening process is.
They're on lockdown.
Yeah. But yeah, so this one and I hate to guess, because I'm not an intel guy and I'm not privy to all the information, but this one seems pretty straightforward. This seems like an act of terrorism. Like, this guy went back to Saudi Arabia and was probably radicalized by someone over there. Not to mention the very shaky relationship between the United States of America and Saudi Arabia, which we could go on for hours talking about.
I almost started into it. I'm alone.
I'm not going there either.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not.
Now, so what they were saying, I had asked in the Pensacola or in the Pearl Harbor shooting, how did the guy get the gun? We actually know how this guy got his gun, although I'm not really sure why. So he had non-citizens are usually not allowed to purchase handguns in the United States, especially foreign military officials. However, Al-Shamrani had a valid hunting license, which allowed him to purchase weapons from authorized dealers in Florida.
I believe he had a sidearm that was an authorized piece of his uniform as well.
No.
His uniform.
He's not allowed to have it
on an American base.
On an American base, you can't even carry a knife on it.
Okay.
You cannot even carry a pocket knife with you.
Sword.
No officer sword or anything like that is allowed on NAS Pensacola.
All right. Well, I stand corrected. I mean, I know because of my Desert Storm time.
Yeah.
I know that they're equivalent to a 45 is part of their uniform. If
right. And in a combat zone, they're allowed to carry it.
Yeah, in a combat zone, they're allowed to carry it. But on a training base like Pensacola, you can't even carry a pocket knife.
Now, this is actually a good segue, because both of these shootings have brought up a debate of sorts about the ability to carry weapons on military bases. Because as we were just kind of discussing, you're really not allowed to, unless you're in an official capacity like an MP, or you're doing some training that involves you having a weapon. Like at the range or something like that, you are not allowed to have your weapon on base. And for anyone who's ever been on a military base, if you go to, I can't speak for how the other branches do it, but if you go to like an Army base, every unit that's there has an arms room that is heavily locked down and heavly secured, and you have to draw your weapon out when it's time to use it, and you can't get
your ID.
Yeah, that's the way the Navy is.
Yeah, and then you can't do anything in the military without your ID, so you're going to give them that weapon back to get your ID.
Yep.
I got something else I wanted to get into. I'm going to add another subject here, Lou. After you get done with this one, because something just hit me.
So, and then on top of that. I hate to use the terminology, there's no better way to describe it. Military bases, for the large part, are gun-free zones. So even if you have a legal concealed carry permit, you're not allowed to carry on a military base. There are rare exceptions to that, and that's usually for people who live on base. The commander can sign off on you having a weapon in your home for home defense, but it happens very, very rarely. And usually the people that get that are upper echelon officers.
But you will not bring that into the mess hall or into the company area.
Right, it's just
those are federal buildings, just like you won't smoke in those buildings.
And if you live in the barracks or whatever it's called,
right, you won't have that either.
You don't get that option at all. But and this is why the debate has sprung up. Is would people having the ability to carry their weapons have put a stop to these shootings? I don't know. It's an age-old debate the United States is going to be having for a very, very long time. But I do find it interesting that even people who are usually very anti-carry have been raising this problem up, for lack of a better term, on the positive side of it, saying, well, why can't service members carry their weapons and yada, yada, yada.
Because of people like the guy out at Pearl and Hickam, if he had his own weapon, he probably would have done more.
Well, I mean, he had his own weapon. So.
You know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Right. It's like I said, it's sparking an interesting debate, which I don't want to get into because it's more political than it is anything else.
Right.
But it is an interesting debate, and there's interesting people that you wouldn't think would be for it who are coming out for it, and interesting people that you would think wouldn't be against it that are saying, no, we can't have that. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of turned the gun debate on its head almost, as it applies directly to the military. But yeah, interesting stuff. So what did you want to say, Duwayne?
Yeah, I gotta ask, because we won't be back here before the new year. I gotta ask, what do you guys think that Kim Jong-un's surprise is going to be for Christmas?
Missile launch.
I had to get a laugh, guys. Come on. What do you think his surprise is going to be? He going to launch a satellite? Is he going to detonate a few nukes underground? Is he going to launch a new ICBM?
Probably.
What do you think?
I think ICBM.
Maybe it's the dissolution of the North Korean state.
No, he don't want to get that power that much.
I doubt it. After all the bullshit over,
can't get a bigger surprise than that, right?
Yeah,
he won't give up power that easy.
That's why he wants those weapons. He's afraid if he doesn't have them, he'll lose the power.
Yep.
Interestingly enough, about the Korea issue, which we have touched on in the past, I just heard the other day that U.S. military in South Korea have had their curfews revoked, so they can now be out all night if they want to.
Oh, go out and meet the Korean hookers.
Yeah. So those thunder runs are about to get more interesting.
Yes. Oh, there is one thing I want to add too. There's going to be a new there's talk of a new policy coming in effect for smokers that you will have to be 21 to be able to use tobacco products.
Yeah, I saw that.
In the military?
In the military.
Wow.
And that's it. That's e-cigs, that's cigarettes, that's chewing tobacco.
Any type of anything with nicotine in it.
Yeah.
You need to be 21 to use it. My problem is, it's just like drinking. If you're old enough to put your name on the dotted line to defend this country, you should be old enough to do it.
Yeah, I have long been a proponent of what I just call the pick a age policy.
Yeah.
Right. So you pick a fucking age, and if you consider that a human being is an adult at that age, then they are entitled to whatever it is adult human beings can do.
Exactly.
They can drink, they can smoke, they can buy a gun, they can vote, they can buy porn. They can, at once make it 16, make it 25. I don't care. Just pick a fucking age.
Fuck up. They also get the adult treatment.
Yep.
Well, yeah, because they're an adult. I hate that we have this so split up. So we have like you can vote and buy porn at 18. You can buy a handgun and now buy cigarettes at 21. Which, by the way, Ohio just enacted not too long ago as well. It's fucking stupid. I get that these things are dangerous. I get it, but personal responsibility.
Exactly.
If they're an adult, they're an adult.
Treat them as such.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So, I mean, yeah, that's my final take on that is pick a fucking age.
Yeah.
And stick to it. Well, gentlemen, it's been a good talk.
Okay.
Despite not having a guest.
We should. I'll have it to where we can actually handle call-ins. Hopefully next time.
All right, outstanding. So we'll look forward to that. And the next time we speak to you guys will be after the new year. Yep. So if you celebrate, happy solstice, Merry Christmas, and have a happy New Year. And to be cheesy, we'll see you next year.
Yeah.
Until then, hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
Good night, ladies. 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 Good night.